They say first impressions are everything. Well, my first impression of Corinne involved her screaming at the top of her lungs while frantically backing away from my exercise equipment like it was about to explode, but I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Ethan Cole, and 3 months ago, I was just another human student trying to make it through the Harmony Academy, the galaxy's premier institution for interspecies cooperation and cultural exchange. Humans had only been part of the Galactic Alliance for 50 years, barely a blip in cosmic time, and we were still considered the awkward new kids at the universal lunch table. Most species saw us as primitive, weak, and about as threatening as a wet tissue paper in a hurricane. The Academy sprawled across the neutral planet of Concordia, its crystalline towers reaching into the purple-tinged sky like fingers trying to grasp the stars. Each building housed students from different corners of the galaxy, all supposedly learning to work together in harmony. The reality was more like barely controlled chaos, with a healthy dose of species supremacy thrown in for good measure. I remember the day everything changed with crystal clarity. It was a Tuesday, which should have been my first warning. Nothing good ever happens on a Tuesday. The morning started with me dragging myself to the communal kitchen, still half asleep and desperately in need of coffee. The Academy's attempt at human coffee tasted like someone had filtered dirt through a sock, but caffeine was caffeine. I was stirring my mud water when the announcement system crackled to life. "Attention students," the synthetic voice droned, somehow managing to sound bored despite being artificial. "Due to increased enrollment, all single-occupancy dormitories will be converted to shared living spaces effective immediately. Your new roommate assignments have been uploaded to your personal devices. Cooperation is mandatory. Have a productive day." I nearly choked on my coffee. Shared living spaces, with my luck, I'd end up with a methane breather who'd turn our room into a toxic waste dump. Or worse, one of those telepathic mindlings who'd judge my every thought. My wrist device pinged with the assignment, and I reluctantly checked the message. "Room 2847B, roommate Corinne of Zalari, species Zalarian warrior caste." My blood turned to ice water. The Zalarians were legendary throughout the galaxy, and not in a good way. They were 7-foot-tall killing machines with natural armor plating, enhanced reflexes, and a cultural philosophy that basically boiled down to might makes right. Their warrior caste was even worse, trained from birth to view combat as the highest form of art. And I, a 5'10" human whose greatest physical achievement was opening a particularly stubborn jar of peanut butter, was about to share living quarters with one. The walk back to my room felt like a death march. Other students gave me sympathetic looks when they saw my expression, probably assuming I'd failed another xenobiology exam. If only they knew the truth was far worse. I stood outside my door for a full minute, gathering courage. Maybe she hadn't arrived yet. Maybe there had been a mistake. Maybe the universe would show mercy just this once. The door slid open, and my hopes died instantly. She stood in the center of the room, and stood was the operative word. Corinne was exactly as intimidating as I'd feared. Her skin was a deep blue-gray that seemed to shimmer with an underlying metallic sheen, natural armor that could deflect small-caliber projectiles. 4 arms crossed over her chest in what I assumed was a defensive posture. Her eyes, all 4 of them, fixed on me with an intensity that made me want to apologize for existing. "You are the human," she stated, not asked. Her voice was like gravel in a blender, though somehow feminine. "Guilty as charged," I said, trying for humor and achieving something closer to a terrified squeak. "I'm Ethan. You must be Corinne." She didn't respond, just continued staring. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire ready to snap. I noticed she'd already claimed the larger half of the room, her belongings arranged with military precision. Various weapons that definitely violated Academy policy were displayed on her wall, each one polished to a mirror shine. "So," I ventured, setting down my bag, "first time having a human roommate." "Your species is weak," she said bluntly, "soft, no natural weapons, no armor, inferior physical capabilities. I have studied your history. You barely survived your own planet, and only through luck and breeding like insects." Well, this was going great. "We prefer to call it determination and innovation," I replied, surprised to find a spark of indignation cutting through my fear. "But sure, insects works too," very flattering. Her upper left eye twitched, which I chose to interpret as amusement rather than homicidal rage. The first few days were an exercise in careful avoidance. Kirin trained constantly, her routine beginning at 0400 Standard Time with combat drills that made the floor shake. I learned to sleep through the rhythmic pounding of her fists against the reinforced practice dummy she'd installed. She ate her meals separately, consuming vast quantities of protein that looked suspiciously like raw meat. We exchanged perhaps 10 words a day, mostly variations of move and understood. It was on the 4th day that disaster struck. I'd been working on a psychology paper about trauma responses in silicon-based life forms when I decided to take a break and do some exercise. The academy gym was always packed with showboating aliens demonstrating their species' superior physical capabilities, so I'd invested in some basic equipment for the room. Nothing fancy, just some resistance bands, a pull-up bar, and my pride and joy, an adjustable spring-loaded gripper for forearm exercises. The gripper was a simple device, really. 2 handles connected by a heavy-duty spring that provided resistance when squeezed. I'd been using it to maintain some semblance of muscle tone in the lower gravity of Concordia. The spring could be adjusted for different resistance levels, and at its maximum setting, it required significant force to compress. I was mid-set when Kirin entered the room. She froze in the doorway, all 4 eyes locked onto the gripper in my hand. The spring was compressed, the metal coils visible between the handles, and as I released it, the device expanded with a distinctive metallic twang. "What is that weapon?" she demanded, her voice sharp with suspicion. "It's not a weapon," I explained, confused by her reaction. "It's exercise equipment. See?" I squeezed it again, the spring compressing with visible effort. Kirin took a step forward, then another, moving with the cautious grace of a predator approaching unknown prey. The metal expands. It stores energy. This is biotechnology. "What? No, it's just a spring. Simple mechanical resistance for muscle training." I held it out to her. "Want to try?" She reached out with one of her lower arms, moving slower than I'd ever seen her move. The moment her fingers made contact with the metal, several things happened in rapid succession. First, the spring, which had been under compression from my grip, released. The handles snapped apart with considerably more force than usual, probably because I'd been adjusting the resistance earlier and left it at maximum. Second, Kirin, the unflappable warrior who I'd seen bench press a small spacecraft engine, screamed. Not a battle cry or a roar of anger, but a genuine shriek of surprise and what sounded like fear. Third, she launched herself backward with all the considerable power in her legs, crashing into the wall hard enough to leave a dent in the reinforced polymer. "It attacks," she shouted, pointing at the gripper with all 4 arms, the swelling tool. "It strikes without warning. What manner of human biotechnology is this?" I stood there, mouth open, gripper dangling harmlessly from my hand. It's just a spring. It didn't attack you. It just..." I saw it swell with power. It stores energy from your life force and releases it as an attack. This is why humans survived. Secret weapons disguised as simple tools. Her eyes were wider than I'd ever seen them. And was that respect? "Kirin, I promise you, this is just ordinary exercise equipment. No life force, no secret weapons, just springs and metal. Here, look. I squeezed it again, showing her the simple mechanical action. But she was already backing toward the door, her gaze never leaving the gripper. I must research this, the implications. If humans have mastered energy storage in such compact forms. She paused at the threshold. You will teach me about this swelling tool. This is not a request. And then she was gone, leaving me standing in our dented room, holding a piece of gym equipment that had somehow just changed the entire dynamic of our relationship. The next morning, I woke to find Corinne sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by tablets, holographic displays, and what appeared to be hand-drawn diagrams of my gripper from every possible angle. She'd been up all night researching. Did you sleep at all? I asked, rubbing my eyes. Sleep is secondary to understanding, she replied without looking up. I have studied your human history. You hide your true nature well. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, psychological manipulation, and now this swelling tool technology. It's really just for working out forearms, I protested weakly. She finally looked at me, her 4 eyes gleaming with an intensity that made me take a step back. Everything humans create serves multiple purposes. You are the masters of dual-use technology. This device conditions your warriors while disguising itself as mere exercise equipment. Brilliant. I wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped me. For the first time since she'd arrived, Corinne wasn't looking at me with disdain or dismissal. She was looking at me like I might actually be interesting. You will train me, she declared, in human combat philosophy. In exchange, I will ensure no one in this academy troubles you. I don't need protection, I started to say, but she cut me off with a gesture. Yesterday, 3 Vorthon students were discussing how to make the weak human fail his xenobiology exam through sabotage. I corrected their misunderstanding. She flexed her upper arms, and I noticed her knuckles were slightly bruised. They will not bother you again. You beat up students for me. I educated them about the dangers of underestimating humans, especially ones with access to swelling tool technology. She stood, towering over me. You are my roommate. In Zalarian culture, this creates a bond. You are under my protection, whether you accept it or not. And that's how I accidentally became the most protected human in the academy, all because of a misunderstanding about a piece of gym equipment. Over the following weeks, Corinne's behavior became increasingly puzzling. She followed me to classes, sitting in the back of lectures she wasn't even enrolled in, taking copious notes whenever I answered a question. She observed my eating habits with scientific intensity, documenting everything from my coffee consumption to my preference for pasta on Thursdays. Why do you consume heated plant matter? She asked one day, watching me eat a salad. Vegetables are good for you. Nutrients, vitamins, fiber, I explained. She made a note on her tablet. Humans sustain themselves on the reproductive organs of plants. Fascinating. This explains your species' relationship with your environment. You are sophisticated parasites. That's not exactly how I'd phrase it, but accurate. You cultivate other life forms for consumption, bend entire ecosystems to your needs. Even your weakest members can survive through agricultural dominance. She looked at me with something approaching admiration, insidious. Her presence, initially unnerving, became oddly comforting. The other students, who had previously viewed me as an easy target, now gave me a wide berth. Word had spread about Corinne's protection, embellished with each retelling until some believed I had somehow tamed a Zalarian warrior with secret human technology. The truth was far stranger. Corinne had developed an obsession with understanding human nature, and I had become her primary research subject. She accompanied me everywhere, a 7-foot shadow with too many eyes and arms, scaring away anyone who might have wanted to interact with me. You're kind of killing my social life, I told her one evening as we sat in the cafeteria. I was eating something that claimed to be pizza, but tasted like cardboard with ambitions. Corinne was consuming her usual protein blocks with mechanical efficiency. "Social bonds make you vulnerable," she replied. "In Zalarian culture, we form alliances only for specific purposes." "What about friendship?" She paused mid-chew. "Define friendship." Well, it's when you enjoy someone's company. You care about their well-being even if there's no strategic advantage. You share experiences, jokes, problems. This sounds like weakness. Maybe, or maybe it's another kind of strength. I pushed my tray aside. Humans are social creatures. We survive through cooperation, not just competition. Corinne was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "Is that why you haven't requested a room transfer, despite my obvious superior claim to the space?" The question caught me off guard. Truth was, I'd thought about it those first few days, but something had changed. Maybe it was the way she'd defended me, or how genuinely curious she was beneath all that warrior posturing. Or maybe I just enjoyed having someone around who made everyone else seem less intimidating by comparison. "You're not so bad once you get past the death threats and casual insults about my species," I said with a grin. "I have not threatened your death in 6 days," she pointed out, and I could swear there was pride in her voice. "See progress." It was 3 weeks into our cohabitation when things took a darker turn. I'd been working late in the library, studying for a particularly brutal exam on interspecies treaty law, when my wrist device buzzed with an urgent message from Corinne. "Return to room immediately. Danger." I ran, my mind racing through possibilities. Had someone attacked her? Was the room on fire? Had she finally figured out that the gripper was just exercise equipment and decided to kill me for the embarrassment? I burst through the door to find Corinne standing battle-ready, all 4 arms wielding different weapons, facing off against a figure in a dark environmental suit. The intruder's face was hidden behind a reflective visor, but the build suggested something reptilian. "Ethan Cole," the figure spoke, their voice artificially modulated. "Your presence is requested for a private discussion." "He declines," Corinne growled, shifting her weight into an attack stance. "This doesn't concern you, Zalarian. Stand aside. You enter our room uninvited, make demands of my roommate, and expect compliance." Corinne laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "You know nothing of human Zalarian pack bonds." Pack bonds, that was new. The intruder tilted their head. "Our intelligence suggested humans were isolated at the academy. This protection is unexpected." "Your intelligence is flawed," I said, stepping beside Corinne, trying to project more confidence than I felt. "What do you want?" "Information. Humanity's psychological warfare capabilities. Your species' rapid expansion despite physical limitations suggests advanced manipulation techniques. We require data." A chill ran down my spine. The figure straightened. "The Vordock Syndicate has interests in understanding all potential threats to galactic stability." Corinne went very, very still. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Vordock." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I'd heard of the Vordock Syndicate in passing, a militaristic faction that believed in genetic superiority and had a habit of making lesser species disappear. But the way Corinne said their name, with a mixture of rage and pain that transcended language barriers, told me there was more to this story. "You know of us, Zalarian, then you know resistance is futile." "I know you destroyed the Zalari colony on Thesix Prime," Corinne said, her grip tightening on her weapons. 40,000 civilians, my clan among them." The pieces clicked into place. Corinne wasn't just a warrior studying abroad. She was a survivor, possibly one of the last of her specific clan. And now their killers were in our room. "Regrettable but necessary," They refused to share their combat enhancement techniques. The figure turned back to me. Humanity will be wiser. We trust. Get out, I said quietly. Excuse me. You heard me. Get out of our room. If the Vordock want to talk, they can make an official request through proper Academy channels. I took a step forward, which was either brave or stupid, probably both. But you don't get to break into our space, threaten us, and expect cooperation. The figure regarded me silently for a moment. You would risk Vordock displeasure for principle. I'd risk it because it's the right thing to do. Also, I gestured to Corinne. My roommate really wants to kill you right now, and I'm not sure I want to stop her. Your combat capabilities are noted in our files as minimal. I pulled out my gripper from my pocket, where I'd taken to carrying it as a sort of good luck charm. Want to bet? The figure actually took a step back. The swelling tool, intelligence reported, unexpected energy discharge capabilities. Karen seized the moment. Human biotechnology is beyond your understanding. Vordock scum, leave now or face the consequences. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the figure raised their hands slowly. This encounter will be reported. The syndicate will remember your choice. Ethan Cole. They backed toward the door, never turning away from us. And you, last daughter of Thesix Prime, your protection of this human is noted. When the door closed behind them, Corinne dropped her weapons and sagged against the wall. I'd never seen her show exhaustion before. You okay? I asked, approaching carefully. They killed everyone, she said quietly. My parents, my siblings, my entire extended clan, because we wouldn't give them our secrets. And now they're here, at the academy, threatening my... She paused, looking at me with an unreadable expression. You're what? My friend, she finished, and the word sounded like it cost her something to say. I sat down beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Want to talk about it? Talking changes nothing. Maybe not, but it might help. She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, she began to speak. She told me about Thesix Prime, about the clan gatherings where young warriors would compete for honor, about her little sister who'd wanted to be a poet instead of a fighter, about the day the Vordock ships darkened their sky. I was off-world for training, she said. When I returned, there was nothing left but ash and ghosts. The Zalarian High Command said it was an unfortunate incident. No retaliation, no justice, just words. I'm sorry, I said, knowing how inadequate it sounded. Your sorrow changes nothing, she replied, but there was no venom in it. But I appreciate the gesture. We sat in silence for a while, processing the weight of what had just happened. The Vordock Syndicate had marked us both now, me for refusing them, and Corinne for standing with me. Why did you protect me? I asked eventually. You could have let them take me. She turned to look at me, all four eyes focused with an intensity that made my breath catch. You are weak. Ethan Cole, physically inferior, tactically naive, and your survival instincts are questionable at best. Thanks for the pep talk. But, she continued, you stood with me against them. No strategic advantage, no logical reason, just because it was, as you said, the right thing to do. She picked up the gripper from where I'd dropped it. Perhaps humans possess a different kind of strength, one the Vordock cannot understand. The power of friendship, I suggested with a weak smile. The power of irrational loyalty, she corrected. It makes no evolutionary sense, but it exists nonetheless. Over the next few days, the Academy felt different. News of the Vordock infiltration had spread, though officially the administration claimed it was just a security drill. Corinne and I both knew better. They were gathering intelligence, testing defenses, preparing for something larger. Corinne's behavior shifted again. Where before she'd been observing me with scientific detachment, now there was something protective, almost possessive in her attention. She started teaching me basic Zalarian combat moves, frustrated by my human limitations but determined to make me less of a target. "Your center of gravity is too high," she criticized during one session, easily flipping me onto the mat for the dozenth time. "You telegraph every move." "Sorry for only having 2 arms and no natural armor," I wheezed, trying to catch my breath. "Excuses. Humans survived on a death world with predators, diseases, and natural disasters. You're more capable than you pretend." She pulled me to my feet with one arm, barely exerting effort. Again. These training sessions became a daily routine. Corinne was a harsh but effective teacher, and I slowly began to understand the philosophy behind Zalarian combat. It wasn't just about strength, it was about reading your opponent, understanding their psychology, turning their assumptions against them. "You're learning," she said one evening after I'd managed to last a full minute before she pinned me, slowly, but learning. "High praise from you." "Don't let it go to your head. You still move like a newborn Grax calf." But I caught her smiling, a rare expression that transformed her face from terrifying to almost beautiful. Not that I'd ever say that out loud. I valued my limbs too much. The midterm season brought its own challenges. The Academy's idea of testing wasn't just academic. They wanted to see how well different species could work together under pressure. We were assigned random partners for a survival simulation on the Academy's testing grounds, a section of wilderness that could be programmed with various hazardous conditions. I was paired with a Vorthan named Dara Ven, one of the students Corinne had educated about underestimating humans. He looked about as thrilled as I felt. "Try not to slow me down, human," he sneered, his tentacles writhing with disgust. Corinne, who'd been assigned a different partner, fixed Dara with a stare that could have melted steel. "Remember our previous discussion, Vorthan?" Dara paled, his skin shifting from purple to a sickly lavender. "Of course." The simulation was brutal. The environment shifted from scorching desert to freezing tundra without warning. Predatory constructs hunted us while we tried to complete objectives that required both species' unique abilities. Dara's tentacles could reach things I couldn't. While my fingers could manipulate delicate controls, his appendages were too thick for. We were making decent progress until we encountered a chasm too wide to jump and too deep to climb. Dara could extend his tentacles to the other side, but couldn't support his own weight to cross. I had an idea. "I'll anchor you," I said, pulling out a length of cable from our supply kit. "Wrap your tentacles around that rock on the other side. I'll hold this end while you swing across. If you drop me, then Corinne will probably kill me, so let's both try to avoid that." It worked. Barely. My arms felt like they were being pulled from their sockets, but I held on as Dara swung across. Once on the other side, he anchored the cable so I could follow. We completed the simulation with passing marks, both exhausted but alive. As we exited the testing grounds, Dara turned to me. "You could have let me fall. Eliminated competition." "That's not how humans do things," I replied. "Usually." He studied me for a moment, then extended a tentacle. "Perhaps I misjudged your species." I shook it, trying not to grimace at the slimy texture. "Perhaps." Corinne was waiting outside, her own partner looking traumatized. "You survived," she observed. "Your faith in me is overwhelming." "Realistic," she corrected, "but improving." That night, she was quieter than usual, working on her weapons maintenance with unusual focus. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. "What's bothering you?" "The Vordock agent. Their presence here wasn't random." "You think they're planning something?" She set down the blade she'd been sharpening. "I've been monitoring Academy communications, encrypted messages, unusual supply requisitions. Changes in security protocols. Something significant is approaching. Should we tell someone? Who would believe us, a survivor with a vendetta and a human? She laughed bitterly. The administration wants to maintain their illusion of neutrality. Then what do we do? She looked at me, and for the first time I saw uncertainty in her eyes. I don't know, but whatever comes, we face it together. Pack bonds, I asked with a slight smile. Perhaps something more, she said quietly, then quickly returned to her weapons as if she'd said too much. The next few weeks passed in a blur of classes, training sessions, and increasingly paranoid surveillance of academy activities. Corinne had set up a complex monitoring system in our room, multiple screens displaying various data streams that made my head hurt just looking at them. Pattern recognition, she explained when I asked how she made sense of it all. The Vordak are methodical. They follow procedures, leave signatures. Look here, she pointed to a shipping manifest. Medical supplies, supposedly for the infirmary, but these quantities, either they're expecting a plague or they're stockpiling for something else. Like what? Neuropharmaceutical compounds, behavioral modifiers, the kind of things you'd need if you were planning to control a large population. The implications made my stomach turn. You think they're going to drug the students? Not drug, reprogram. She pulled up another file, this one requiring several encryption keys to access. I've been researching Vordak technology. They've been developing something called a neuro-leash, direct neural control through chemical and electromagnetic manipulation. That's slavery with extra steps. It's efficiency. From their perspective, why fight wars when you can simply make your enemies into willing servants? She closed the file with a gesture of disgust. My clan died rather than give them our combat techniques. Now they seek to simply take what they want from everyone's minds. A knock at our door interrupted the conversation. We exchanged glances, Corinne's hand moving to the nearest weapon. I approached cautiously, checking the security display. It's Professor Malik, I said, surprised. The elderly human professor taught advanced xenopsychology and was one of the few faculty members who treated all species equally. Corinne relaxed slightly but kept her weapon within reach. I opened the door to find Professor Malik looking unusually serious, his normally cheerful face drawn with worry. Mr. Cole, Miss Corinne, may I come in? Of course, Professor. I stepped aside, noting how he checked the hallway before entering. I'll be brief, he said, his voice low. I know you've been investigating the unusual activities on campus. Don't deny it, he added when I started to protest. I've been doing the same. Something is very wrong here. Corinne studied him with all four eyes. You know about the Vordak. It wasn't a question. Professor Malik nodded grimly. I've been tracking their influence for years. They've been infiltrating educational institutions across the galaxy, recruiting or eliminating the brightest minds of each species. The Academy was supposed to be neutral ground, but neutrality is just another word for vulnerability. Corinne finished. Precisely. I believe they're planning something during the upcoming Unity Festival. With representatives from every major species present, it would be the perfect opportunity to deploy their neuro-leash technology. The Unity Festival was the Academy's biggest annual event, a week-long celebration of interspecies cooperation that drew visitors from across the galaxy. If the Vordak struck then, we need to warn someone, I said. Professor Malik shook his head. Who would believe us without proof? And half the administration is probably already compromised. No, we need concrete evidence, and we need a plan to counter their technology. The swelling tool, Corinne said suddenly, causing both the professor and me to look at her in confusion. Ethan's device. The Vordak agent was afraid of it. They believe it's some kind of human weapon technology. Professor Malik raised an eyebrow. Swelling tool. I held up my gripper, feeling ridiculous. It's just exercise equipment. But Corinne accidentally convinced half the academy it's some kind of secret human bioweapon. The professor examined it with interest. Perception can be more powerful than reality. Mr. Cole, if the Vordock believe humans possess unknown defensive capabilities, we could bluff, I said, understanding dawning, make them hesitate, second-guess their plan. It would require convincing performance, Professor Malik warned, and significant risk if they call your bluff. Then we're no worse off than if we do nothing, Corinne interjected. I say we proceed. Professor Malik stood to leave. I'll continue gathering intelligence through faculty channels. You two work on developing this swelling tool narrative. We may only get one chance at this. After he left, Corinne and I sat in contemplative silence. Finally, she spoke. You realize what we're proposing: psychological warfare against one of the most dangerous organizations in the galaxy. Using a piece of gym equipment as our primary weapon, I added. It's so stupid it might actually work. Or get us killed. Probably that, yeah. She made that grinding sound that I'd learned was Zalarian laughter. You humans are insane. Coming from someone who tried to fight a spring and lost, that's rich. She threw a pillow at my head with enough force to knock me off my chair. I did not lose to a spring. I made a tactical withdrawal. You screamed and ran into a wall. Tactical withdrawal. Our banter was interrupted by an academy-wide announcement. All students are required to attend a mandatory assembly in the main auditorium in 1 hour. Attendance will be monitored, no exceptions. Corinne and I exchanged worried glances. Mandatory assemblies were rare and usually meant bad news. The auditorium was packed, every seat filled with students from dozens of species. The nervous energy was palpable, conversations in 100 languages creating a cacophony of anxiety. Corinne and I found seats near an exit, her tactical instincts demanding easy escape routes. The lights dimmed, and Administrator Reeves took the stage. The Altarian's blue crystalline form reflected the stage lights in mesmerizing patterns, but there was something off about his usually confident demeanor. Students of Harmony Academy, he began, his synthesized voice carrying clearly through the space. I come before you with important news. The Academy has entered into a new partnership that will revolutionize interspecies education. A murmur ran through the crowd. Partnerships were usually announced months in advance, not sprung on the student body. Please welcome our new benefactors, representatives of the Vordock Syndicate. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Several species with historical grievances against the Vordock shifted uneasily. Beside me, Corinne had gone completely rigid. 3 figures in dark environmental suits walked onto the stage, their faces hidden behind those reflective visors. The one in the center spoke, their modulated voice somehow managing to sound both pleasant and threatening. Students of the Academy, we come in peace and progress. The Vordock Syndicate has long recognized that the future of the galaxy lies not in conflict, but in cooperation. To that end, we are implementing a new program to enhance learning efficiency and reduce interspecies tension. They gestured, and a hologram appeared showing a small, innocent-looking device that looked like a metallic headband. The Cognitive Enhancement Interface, or CEI, will allow students to absorb information directly, eliminate language barriers, and foster true understanding between species. Participation will begin with volunteers, but we hope to see full adoption within the current academic cycle. It's the neuro-leash, Corinne whispered, her voice tight with rage. They're not even trying to hide it. A student near the front, a young Felinian, raised a pawed hand. What if we don't want to participate? The Vordock representative tilted their head. Why would anyone refuse the opportunity for enhanced learning and perfect understanding, unless, of course, they have something to hide? The threat was subtle but clear. refuse and be marked as suspicious, potentially subversive. Furthermore, the representative continued, to celebrate this partnership, the Unity Festival will feature demonstrations of the CEI technology. All attending dignitaries will have the opportunity to experience its benefits firsthand. They plan to use the festival to spread their control to the galaxy's leaders. It was brilliant in its simplicity. The assembly continued with more propaganda dressed as progress, but I stopped listening. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how to stop this. Beside me, Corinne was practically vibrating with suppressed violence. As we filed out of the auditorium, Daraven approached us, his tentacles writhing anxiously. "Did you hear they're starting volunteer trials tomorrow? My roommate already signed up. Says it's the smart move, staying ahead of the curve." "Your roommate is an idiot," Corinne said flatly. Dara flinched but didn't argue. "What are you going to do?" I thought about it for a moment, then made a decision that would either be brilliant or catastrophic. "We're going to volunteer." Both Corinne and Dara stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Have you lost your mind?" Corinne hissed. "Think about it," I said, lowering my voice. "They expect resistance from people like you, with historical grievances. But humans, we're the new species, eager to prove ourselves, desperate to fit in. If I volunteer, I can get close, maybe figure out how the technology actually works." "It's suicide," Corinne protested. "It's psychology," I countered. "The best way to defeat an enemy is to understand them, and right now, they think humans are weak, controllable. Let's use that assumption against them." That night, Corinne paced our room like a caged predator while I filled out the volunteer application. Every few minutes, she'd stop and glare at me. "This is foolish. You've mentioned that 12 times. Because it bears repeating. You're walking into a trap." While carrying my secret weapon, I held up the gripper with a weak smile. She snatched it from my hand, examining it with the intensity she usually reserved for actual weapons. "Tell me again how this simple mechanical device will save you from neural subjugation." "It won't, but the fear of what it might be could buy us time." The Vordock agent was genuinely scared of it. That reaction came from somewhere, some report or rumor about human technology. We need to amplify that fear. With theater and deception, the foundation of human warfare, since we figured out that standing upright made us look bigger to predators. She handed the gripper back, her expression thoughtful. "You're either much cleverer than you appear, or much stupider. Why not both?" The next morning came too quickly. I stood outside the medical center where the trials were being conducted, trying to calm my racing heart. Corinne had wanted to come with me, but we'd agreed her presence would be too suspicious. Inside, the facility had been transformed. Vordock technology hummed with ominous efficiency, all sleek surfaces and pulsing lights. A dozen volunteers from various species sat in waiting areas, most looking eager, a few nervous. "Ethan Cole," a voice called. I looked up to see the same Vordock agent from our room intrusion. How unexpected. "I'm full of surprises," I replied, trying to project confidence. "Indeed, your application was interesting. You claim to want to bridge the gap between humanity and other species through enhanced understanding. Doesn't everyone want that? Some more genuinely than others." They gestured to a preparation room. "Please proceed. We'll begin with a baseline neural scan." The next hour was a blur of tests, scans, and increasingly invasive questions about human psychology, social structures, and survival mechanisms. I answered truthfully when possible, misleadingly when necessary, always maintaining the image of an eager, naive human wanting to belong. Finally, they brought out the device. Up close, the CEI looked even more innocuous, just a simple band of metal with small contact points that would rest against the temples. "The initial calibration may cause some discomfort." The technician, a nervous-looking Rigelian, explained, "But once synchronized with your neural patterns, you should experience enhanced cognitive function immediately." I sat in the chair, letting them position the device. My hand found the gripper in my pocket, its familiar weight oddly comforting. The metal band was cold against my skin. "Initiating calibration," the technician announced. The world exploded into sensation, not pain exactly, but a presence, alien and invasive, pushing into my thoughts. I could feel it probing, searching for something to latch onto, pathways to control. But human brains are weird. We evolved with competing neural systems, rational thought constantly at war with primitive instincts, conscious mind barely controlling the chaos beneath. The CEI seemed to be struggling with this contradictory architecture. I focused on that chaos, embracing the randomness of human thought, memory fragments, song lyrics, the plot of a movie I'd seen years ago, the taste of my grandmother's cookies, the fear of spiders, the joy of a perfect joke landing, all mixed together in a storm of human experience. The device sparked, actually sparked, and the technician pulled it away quickly. "Anomalous reading," they reported to the Vordoc agent. "The subject's neural patterns are inconsistent." Explain? Human cognition appears to operate on multiple contradictory frequencies simultaneously. The CEI cannot establish a stable connection without risking feedback damage to the device. The agent approached me, their visor reflecting my purposefully confused expression. "You did something." "I thought about stuff," I said innocently. "Was I not supposed to think? That's kind of hard for me. My mom always said I think too much. Random thoughts, she called it. Did you know that earth squirrels can't actually remember where they hide most of their nuts? They just rely on statistical probability to find them again." Weird, right? Oh, and have you ever noticed how the word bed looks like a bed? The B is the headboard and the... Enough. The agent's voice was sharp. "Remove him. Mark his file for further study." As I was escorted out, I caught a glimpse of other volunteers receiving their devices. Most seemed to accept the neural intrusion without issue, their expressions becoming oddly serene as the CEI took hold. Only a few showed signs of resistance, and they were quickly sedated. I made it back to our room before my legs gave out. Corinne caught me as I stumbled through the door, her strong arms easily supporting my weight. "Report," she demanded, but her voice was soft with concern. "It works exactly as we feared," I gasped, the effort of maintaining that mental chaos having exhausted me. "Direct neural control through forced synchronization, but human brains are too messy for it to lock onto easily. Your species' dysfunction is an advantage. Apparently, psychological chaos is our superpower." I laughed weakly. "They'll figure out how to adapt the technology eventually, but right now, they're confused." She helped me to my bed, then sat beside me, one of her hands resting on my shoulder. "You took an insane risk." "Calculated insane risk," I corrected. "What's the difference?" I had my secret weapon. I pulled out the gripper, noting with satisfaction that she actually flinched slightly. Plus, now we know their plan has a weakness. They can't easily control humans, and they don't understand why. Over the next few days, the CEI trials expanded rapidly. More and more students volunteered or were volunteered by their peers. Those who received the devices became model citizens overnight, perfectly cooperative, eerily efficient, and completely devoted to the Vordoc's vision of order. But there were pockets of resistance. Professor Malik had secretly gathered a small group of faculty and students who recognized the threat. We met in hidden spaces, sharing information and trying to develop countermeasures. "The festival is in 3 days," Professor Malik reported at one such gathering. "Security is being handled entirely by Vordoc forces and controlled students. We won't be able to prevent the demonstration. Then we need to disrupt it." A Martian engineer named Torres suggested electromagnetic pulse system hack. They'll be prepared for obvious sabotage, Corinne argued. We need something unexpected. Something chaotic, I added, an idea forming. Something uniquely human. Everyone looked at me expectantly. The Vordock value order, control, predictability, they've turned most of the academy into perfectly synchronized drones. But what happens when you introduce pure, concentrated human chaos into that system? Define chaos, Professor Malik said, though I could see him starting to smile. Flash mob, performance art, improvised musical numbers, memes, all the weird, random, inexplicable things humans do that make no logical sense. We flood their perfectly ordered demonstration with pure, undiluted human weirdness. That's your plan, Torres asked incredulously. Defeat the military syndicate with performance art. Not defeat, distract, confuse, make them reveal their true nature in front of the galaxy's leaders. Right now, they're maintaining a facade of benevolence. But if we can make them crack, show their authoritarian response to simple human expression, the delegates will see them for what they really are, Professor Malik finished. It's psychological warfare at its finest. Corinne was grinning now, all her teeth showing in an expression that was equal parts pride and bloodthirst. You want to weaponize human absurdity. I want to weaponize human humanity, I corrected. The things that make us weird, unpredictable, impossible to fully control. We spent the remaining days preparing. Professor Malik used his connections to secretly invite independent journalists to the festival. Torres worked on devices that would amplify and broadcast our disruption. Corinne trained a handful of combat-ready students in case things turned violent. And I practiced with my gripper, turning it into a prop for the strangest performance piece ever conceived. The morning of the Unity Festival dawned bright and clear. The Academy was decorated with banners representing every member species of the Galactic Alliance. Delegates had been arriving all week, each one carefully guided by CEI-controlled students who smiled too much and never blinked at the wrong time. I stood in our room, adjusting the formal outfit required for the ceremony. Corinne was applying war paint. She called it cultural expression, but I knew she was preparing for battle. Whatever happens today, she said, meeting my eyes in the mirror, I want you to know something. If this is a goodbye speech, I'd rather not. Shut up and listen. She turned to face me fully. When you first arrived, I thought you were just another weak human, barely worth noticing. But you've shown me something I didn't think possible. Strength doesn't always come from muscle or weapons. Sometimes it comes from the willingness to face impossible odds with nothing but determination and exercise equipment. Are you saying you like me? I'm saying I respect you. There's a difference. But you also like me. She punched my shoulder gently by her standards, which meant I'd only have a small bruise. Don't push your luck. Human. The festival's main ceremony was held in the Academy's Grand Plaza, an open-air venue that could hold thousands. Delegates from every major civilization sat in elevated viewing platforms while students and faculty filled the ground level. The Vordock had set up their demonstration stage in the center, the CEI devices displayed like religious artifacts. Administrator Reeves began the ceremony with a speech about unity and progress that sounded like it had been written by the Vordock PR department. Then the lead Vordock agent took the stage. Distinguished guests, they began. Today marks a new chapter in galactic civilization. The cognitive enhancement interface represents the next step in evolution, a tool to eliminate misunderstanding, conflict, and inefficiency. They gestured to a group of CEI-controlled students who moved in perfect synchronization, demonstrating various cooperative tasks with eerie precision. Observe the harmony, the perfect unity of purpose. This is the future we offer. That was our cue. It started small, A human student in the crowd began to clap, but off rhythm, purposefully out of sync with everyone else. Then another joined, clapping to a completely different beat. Then another. The controlled students tried to maintain their demonstration, but the irregular sound was clearly affecting them, causing micro-glitches in their synchronization. Then I stepped forward, pulling out my gripper and holding it high. "Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings of all classifications," I announced, my voice carrying thanks to Torres's hidden amplifiers. "I present to you a demonstration of human potential." I began to squeeze the gripper rhythmically, the spring's resistance creating a peculiar twanging sound. Other humans in the crowd pulled out their own items, rubber bands, springs, anything that could make noise. We created a cacophony of chaotic rhythm, no pattern, no synchronization, just pure auditory chaos. The Vordock agent stepped forward. "Cease this disruption immediately." "But we're demonstrating unity," I called back innocently. "Human unity, unless you have something against human expression." It was a trap, and they knew it. In front of all these delegates, they couldn't openly suppress what appeared to be a cultural demonstration without revealing their authoritarian nature. Then Corinne started the chant. It was nonsense, just syllables that sounded vaguely like words, but meant nothing. But other students picked it up, adding their own variations, creating a growing wave of meaningless but enthusiastic sound. The CEI-controlled students began to malfunction more obviously now, their synchronized movements stuttering as their brains tried to process and adapt to the chaos around them. Some stopped moving entirely, standing frozen as their neural implants struggled with the input. "Enough!" The Vordock agent's amplified voice boomed across the plaza. They pulled out a weapon, pointing it directly at me. "This disorder will cease now." The plaza fell silent. Every delegate, every journalist who'd snuck in, every free-thinking being present saw the truth in that moment. The Vordock's benevolent mask had slipped, revealing the authoritarian control beneath. "You would threaten violence against a student for making noise." Professor Malik stepped forward, his aged voice carrying surprising authority, "for expressing their culture." "This is not culture, it's chaos," the agent snarled. "And chaos," I said, still holding my gripper high, "is humanity's gift to the galaxy. We're unpredictable, illogical, impossible to fully control. We're the random element in your perfect equation, the chaos in your order, and that terrifies you, doesn't it?" The agent's weapon wavered. Around us, delegates were standing, some shouting objections, others calling for security. The carefully orchestrated demonstration was falling apart. "You think you've won something," the agent hissed. "The Vordock Syndicate spans systems. We have resources beyond your comprehension." "Maybe," I admitted, "but you don't have this." I squeezed the gripper one final time, and in that moment, every human in the crowd did something random. Some sang, others danced, a few told jokes. One group started playing an impromptu game of tag. It was humanity in all its chaotic, beautiful, incomprehensible glory. The CEI-controlled students began breaking free, the sheer randomness overloading their neural constraints. They looked confused, disoriented, but free. The Vordock agent lowered their weapon, speaking into a communicator. "Initiate extraction. The Academy is compromised." They began to retreat, their controlled forces abandoning their posts. But as they reached their ships, Corinne stepped into their path. "You forgot something," she said, her voice deadly calm. "Move, Zelarian." "You took my clan, my family, my world." She pulled out a datapad. "But you didn't take my memory, every war crime, every atrocity, every violation of galactic law. It's all here, transmitted to every news network, every government, every authority in known space." The agent actually stepped back. "You have no proof." "I have something better. I have a witness." She gestured to me, A human who stood against you with nothing but principle and an exercise device, whose testimony will be believed because humans are too chaotic to lie consistently. It was checkmate. The Vordock could leave, but they'd be leaving as exposed war criminals, their expansion plans in ruins. As their ships departed, the plaza erupted in confusion, celebration, and no small amount of chaos. Delegates demanded explanations, freed students sought medical attention, and journalists scrambled to document everything. In the middle of it all, Corinne found me. "We did it," I said, hardly believing it. "You did it," she corrected, "with the stupidest plan in galactic history. But it worked." That doesn't make it less stupid. But she was smiling, that fierce, beautiful smile that meant she was genuinely happy. "Ethan Cole, you are absolutely insane." Is that a compliment? From a Zalarian warrior, it's the highest praise possible. She pulled me into a hug that definitely cracked a few ribs, but I didn't care. We'd faced down one of the galaxy's most dangerous organizations with nothing but human weirdness and determination. The aftermath of the Unity Festival was like watching dominoes fall in reverse, each revelation building something larger instead of knocking it down. Within hours, the Galactic Alliance had issued warrants for the Vordock leadership. Within days, liberated worlds were celebrating their freedom. Within a week, I couldn't walk across campus without someone wanting to shake my hand, take a photo, or ask about the legendary swelling tool. "I hate this," I muttered, ducking into our room after avoiding yet another group of curious first years. Corinne looked up from her weapons maintenance, which she still did religiously, despite the reduced threat level. "The hero of the academy complains about admiration." I'm not a hero. I just confused some fascists with a spring-loaded grip trainer. You stood against impossible odds with nothing but courage and absurdity. On Zalari, we have a word for that Vrakthar. What does it mean?
Glorious idiot.
Thanks. Really feeling the love here. She set down her blade, turning to face me fully. It's a term of deep respect. To be gloriously idiotic means to achieve victory through means so unexpected that enemies cannot counter them. You've earned the title. Before I could respond, our door chimed. Corinne immediately tensed, but I checked the display and relaxed. It's Professor Malik and Administrator Reeves. The administrator looked different without Vordock influence, his crystalline form seeming brighter, more vibrant. Professor Malik wore his usual gentle smile, though I noticed new lines of exhaustion around his eyes. "Mr. Cole, Miss Corinne," Reeves began formally, "I owe you both an apology. I failed in my duty to protect this institution and its students." "You were under neural control," Corinne said bluntly. "Blame is pointless. Nevertheless, I bear responsibility, which is why I'm here to offer you both something." He produced 2 data pads. "Full scholarships for advanced studies. Anywhere in the Alliance, your actions have earned you the galaxy's gratitude." I looked at the offer, seeing opportunities at institutions I'd only dreamed of attending, but something felt off. "What's the catch?" Professor Malik chuckled, still thinking like a psychologist. "Good. The catch, Mr. Cole, is that the Alliance wants to formalize what you've stumbled upon. They want to create a new division focused on asymmetric defense, using unconventional methods to protect against future threats. You want to weaponize chaos. We want to understand it," Reeves corrected. "Your demonstration proved that rigid order has vulnerabilities. The galaxy needs defenders who think differently, who can find strength in apparent weakness." Corinne crossed all 4 arms. "You want us to be your chaos agents. We want you to teach others what you've learned," Professor Malik said. "The bond between you two, human creativity paired with Zalarian strength, it could be a model for a new kind of cooperation." I looked at Corinne, seeing my own uncertainty reflected in her eyes. "We need time to think about it." Of course, but know that whatever you decide, you've already changed the galaxy for the better. After they left, Corinne and I sat in comfortable silence. It had become our way, these quiet moments where we didn't need words, but eventually, she spoke. My clan is gone, my world is destroyed. I came here seeking purpose through revenge. She paused, one of her hands finding mine. I found something else instead. A gloriously idiotic human. A family, she corrected softly. You gave me that, Ethan Cole, when I had nothing but rage. You showed me how to laugh again, how to hope. The weight of her words hit me like a physical force. Corinne, Let me finish. In Zalarian culture, we have bonding ceremonies, not marriage as humans understand it, but a recognition of souls that choose to face the universe together, warriors who become more than the sum of their parts. My heart was racing. Are you asking me to? I'm asking if you would consider being my battle bond, my partner in all things, chaos and order, war and peace. She squeezed my hand gently, careful not to break bones. I know human courtship typically involves more time, romantic gestures, something called dating. Corinne, I interrupted, you've been following me around for months, studying my every move, protecting me from threats, and teaching me to fight. We've faced death together, saved the galaxy, and you've seen me at my absolute weirdest. If that's not dating, I don't know what is. So your answer? I pulled out my gripper, offering it to her with mock solemnity. I pledge my swelling tool to your service. She laughed, that grinding, beautiful sound that I'd grown to love, and took the gripper. I accept your weapon, weak as it is. 2 months later, the Academy hosted its first interspecies Unity Combat exhibition, a new tradition meant to celebrate diversity in fighting styles. Corinne and I were asked to demonstrate our unique collaborative approach. Standing in the arena, facing a team of senior combat students, I felt the familiar pre-fight nerves. Corinne stood beside me, radiating confidence. Remember, she murmured, confusion is your strength, and violence is yours. Together, we are unstoppable. The match began, and our opponents moved with practiced precision. Clearly, having studied traditional combat patterns, they expected Corinne to charge, for me to hang back. Instead, I ran forward, screaming wordlessly while wildly swinging my gripper like a flail. The sheer absurdity of it made them hesitate for just a moment. A moment was all Corinne needed. She flowed through their formation like water through a sieve, her 4 arms creating a whirlwind of controlled violence. But she didn't fight to win quickly. She fought to create even more chaos, throwing opponents in random directions, using me as an improvised projectile at one point. I rolled with it, literally, coming up from the throw to bang my gripper against a training shield with no rhythm or reason, creating a clanging distraction that made prediction impossible. The match ended in 3 minutes. Our opponents were defeated not through superior skill, though Corinne had that in abundance, but through the complete breakdown of their ability to form coherent strategy. The crowd erupted in cheers and confused applause. In the stands, I spotted Professor Malik nodding approvingly, and beside him, several Alliance military observers taking extensive notes. Show-offs, Torres called from the sidelines, but he was grinning. Daraven had started a betting pool on how long the match would last. I lost credits, he complained good-naturedly, his tentacles writhing with amusement. I bet on 2 minutes. As we left the arena, Corinne pulled me aside. The Alliance observers want to meet with us. They're serious about the asymmetric defense program. I know. The question is, are we serious about it? She considered this. A year ago, I would have said no. Fighting without honor, using confusion and misdirection. It went against everything I was taught. She paused, looking at the gripper still in my hand. But you've taught me that sometimes the greatest honor comes from protecting others, regardless of the methods. And you've taught me that sometimes you need to stand and fight, even when running would be smarter. Especially then. We met with the Alliance representatives in a secure conference room. Admiral Thresh, a decorated Altarian war hero, led the delegation. Your demonstration was illuminating, she said carefully. We've been analyzing combat doctrine for centuries, but we've never seen anything quite like your approach. That's because it's not doctrine, I explained. It's anti-doctrine. The moment you codify chaos, it stops being chaotic. Yet you've managed to use it effectively, repeatedly. Keirin leaned forward. Because we don't try to control it. We create conditions where chaos benefits us more than our opponents. Admiral Thresh pulled up a holographic display showing various conflict zones across the galaxy. The Vordok were not our only threat. There are dozens of aggressive factions that use rigid, predictable tactics. Your methods could save countless lives. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. A new academy program, the Asymmetric Response Division. You two would be the founding instructors, teaching selected students from various species how to integrate unconventional thinking with traditional combat skills. Students like who? Keirin's tone was suspicious. Another figure entered the room, and my jaw dropped. It was the Vordok agent who had threatened us, but their environmental suit was gone, revealing a reptilian features with scales that shifted between green and gold. Students like me, they said, their unmodulated voice surprisingly soft. Keirin was on her feet instantly, weapons materializing in her hands. You dare! Please. The reptilian raised their hands peacefully. Was Agent Sylth. When the Syndicate fell, many of us were freed from our own versions of neural control. We were tools, just as much as those we sought to subjugate. You killed my clan, Keirin snarled. My body did. My mind was imprisoned, watching helplessly as I committed atrocities. Sylth's scales shifted to a deep blue. What I'd learned was a sign of profound sorrow in their species. I cannot undo the past, but I can offer my knowledge of Syndicate tactics, help prevent others from suffering as your people did. The room was thick with tension. Keirin's muscles were coiled, ready to strike, but she looked at me, seeking something in my expression. The cycle has to stop somewhere, I said quietly. Revenge just creates more revenge. If they're genuinely free, genuinely repentant, you would forgive the unforgivable. I'd try to understand it. That's what humans do. We look for reasons, for connections, for ways to move forward, even when moving forward seems impossible. Keirin was silent for a long moment, then slowly lowered her weapons. If you betray this trust, if you show any sign of returning to Syndicate ways, I will end you. I would expect nothing less, Sylth replied. Admiral Thresh cleared her throat. So, will you accept the position? I looked at Keirin, saw her nod slightly. On one condition, the program doesn't just teach combat. It teaches the psychology behind it, the cultural understanding, the recognition that strength comes in many forms. Agreed. And everyone has to train with one of these? I held up my gripper. If they can't handle the swelling tool, they can't handle true chaos. The Admiral looked confused but nodded. If you insist. 6 months into the program, our first class was a disaster in the best possible way. 20 students from 15 different species, each bringing their own prejudices, assumptions, and combat philosophies. There was Kree, a young mindling who could read thoughts but couldn't handle the mental noise of human stream of consciousness. Boxer, a Terran colonist who joined specifically to work with the legendary Chaos Master, aka me. And perhaps most surprisingly, Vara, Keirin's cousin who'd survived the Thesix Prime massacre by being off-world like Corinne. Your mate is insane, Vera told Corinne after the first week of training. Yes, Corinne agreed proudly, gloriously so. The training itself defied every military convention. One day we'd practice traditional combat, the next we'd have improvisation theater. Students learned to fight while singing, to use interpretive dance as a combat distraction, to weaponize dad jokes and puns. Silth proved to be an invaluable asset, their insider knowledge helping us understand and counter dozens of rigid military doctrines. They also became something unexpected, a friend. I don't understand human humor, they admitted one evening as we shared dinner. The setup creates expectation, but the punchline deliberately subverts it. How is this amusing? That's exactly why it's amusing, I explained. Humor is controlled chaos. It takes our expectations and flips them, creating surprise and delight. Or groaning and eye rolls, Corinne added, having suffered through too many of my puns. Those two. Silth's scales shifted to yellow. Their version of curiosity. Could this principle be applied to combat? Everything can be applied to combat if you're creative enough, Corinne said. Ethan once defeated an opponent by aggressively complimenting their scales until they became too flustered to fight effectively. It was a diplomatic solution, I protested. It was psychological warfare disguised as friendliness, the most human thing possible. As the program grew, so did its reputation. We had victories and failures, students who thrived in chaos and others who couldn't adapt, but slowly, something beautiful emerged, a new understanding of strength that wasn't about power or control, but about adaptation and creativity. The real test came during the annual Galactic Defense Symposium. Traditional military academies would demonstrate their best tactics, and we'd been invited to participate. The old guard was skeptical, some openly hostile to our methods. General Korth of the Regellian fleet was particularly vocal. Combat is about discipline, precision, overwhelming force. This chaos nonsense is an insult to military tradition. Would you care to test that theory? Corinne challenged, her warrior instincts flaring. A demonstration your rabble against my academy's finest. Agreed, I said, before Corinne could escalate further. Standard capture the flag rules. Acceptable. The match was scheduled for the next day. That night, our students were nervous. They outnumber us 3-1, Cree pointed out. They have better equipment, Boxer added. They have centuries of military tradition, Vara said grimly. And that's exactly why we'll win. I told them they'll do everything by the book. So we're going to rewrite the book, burn it, and then perform interpretive dance on its ashes. That makes no sense, Silth observed. Exactly, Corinne and I said in unison. The match began at dawn. The Regellian forces moved in perfect formation, their approach methodical and tactically sound. They expected us to defend our flag with conventional positioning. Instead, we'd hidden it inside a papier-mâché sculpture of a Regellian folk hero that Boxer had spent all night creating. Then we'd made 17 fake flags and distributed them randomly, including one that Cree was wearing as a cape while performing what he called psychic performance art. The Regellians found our base apparently undefended, just Vara sitting there playing a stringed instrument badly. Where are your forces? Their commander demanded. What forces? Vara asked innocently. We're having a music festival. Want to join? That's when our students emerged from the most ridiculous hiding spots imaginable. Inside garbage bins, dressed as bushes. One had somehow convinced a local food vendor to let them hide in their cart. Silth had used their color-changing abilities to pretend to be abstract art. The battle was chaos incarnate. Every time the Regellians tried to form ranks, someone would start a conga line through their formation. When they attempted flanking maneuvers, they'd find their path blocked by impromptu poetry readings. I personally spent most of the match loudly narrating everything like a nature documentary. And here we see the majestic Rigelian warrior in their natural habitat. Notice how they move in synchronized patterns, much like Earth's ancient dancing traditions. It was so monumentally stupid that it worked. The Rigelians couldn't adapt to opponents who refused to fight conventionally. They'd train for enemies who would attack or defend, not ones who would challenge them to dance battles or offer them snacks mid-combat. Corinne, meanwhile, used the chaos as cover for actual tactical brilliance. While everyone was distracted by the absurdity, she systematically dismantled their command structure with surgical strikes, always appearing where they least expected. The match ended when Boxer, dressed as a delivery person, simply walked into their base and took their flag while they were trying to figure out which of our 17 decoys was real. "This is impossible," General Korth protested. "You didn't fight, you just performed." "Performance is a kind of fighting," I explained. "We fought your expectations, your training, your assumptions, and we won. But there's no honor in this." Corinne stepped forward, her full height towering over the general. "There is no honor in predictability that costs lives. No glory in rigid thinking that leaves you vulnerable. We teach survival through adaptation. If that offends your sensibilities, perhaps your sensibilities need updating." The crowd was divided, some cheering, others grumbling, but Admiral Thresh was smiling. The Asymmetric Response Division has proven its worth. The program will receive full funding and expansion. As we celebrated with our students, Sylth approached me. "I've been analyzing our success. It's not really about chaos, is it?" "What do you mean?" "It's about connection. Human chaos forces connection, breaks down barriers, makes people react as individuals rather than units. That's the real weapon." I looked at Corinne, surrounded by students from a dozen species, all laughing at some terrible joke Boxer was telling. "Yeah, maybe you're right." The Vordok never understood that. We thought unity meant control, that strength meant dominance. Their scales shifted to a warm orange. "You and Corinne showed me another way. Thank you." That night, in our quarters, Corinne and I watched the stars through our window. The galaxy was vast, full of threats and challenges we couldn't imagine, but it was also full of possibilities. "What are you thinking?" she asked, her hand finding mine. "About how a misunderstanding over exercise equipment led to all this." I squeezed her hand gently. "If you hadn't touched my swelling tool." She groaned. "Are you ever going to stop calling it that?" "Never. It's part of our legend now. The human with the swelling tool and the Zelarian warrior who screamed at a spring." "We need a better legend." "No," I said, pulling her close. "I think ours is perfect just the way it is." A year later, the first graduating class of the Asymmetric Response Division stood ready for deployment. They were an odd bunch, trained in combat and comedy, strategy and stupidity. Each carried a gripper, now officially designated as the Model 1 Chaos Inducer, despite my protest that it was still just exercise equipment. Corinne had been offered a position as general in the reformed Zelarian fleet, but turned it down. "My place is here," she'd said, "teaching future generations that strength and joy can coexist." As for me, I'd published a paper on tactical applications of psychological absurdity that was either brilliant or insane. Depending on who you asked, it had become required reading at the academy, much to the confusion of traditional military scholars. Standing before our graduates, I felt a weight of responsibility. These young beings would go out into the galaxy carrying our philosophy, our methods, our particularly weird brand of warfare. "You've all learned to fight." I began my speech. "But more importantly, you've learned to think, to laugh, to find strength in the unexpected. The galaxy will try to make you conform, to follow patterns, to be predictable. Don't let it." Corinne stepped up beside me. Be chaos when order fails. Be order when chaos overwhelms. Be yourselves, always, because that's where true power lies. And remember, I added, holding up my gripper one more time, sometimes the most powerful weapon is the one that makes your enemy stop and think, what the hell is that thing? The graduates laughed, a sound that echoed across species and cultures, as they dispersed to their assignments across the galaxy, each carrying the spirit of controlled chaos. I knew we'd started something that couldn't be stopped. The Vordock had been wrong. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't our adaptability or our resilience. It was our ability to find humor in darkness, to create connections through confusion, to turn weakness into unexpected strength. And it all started because an alien roommate touched my exercise equipment and screamed. Looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. The distress signal came at 3 a.m, jarring me from a dream about teaching calculus to sentient clouds. Corinne was already up, fully armed before I'd even processed what was happening. Major incursion in Sector 9, she said, pulling up the tactical display. Multiple Vordock vessels. The Vordock, but they were disbanded, their leaders imprisoned. Apparently someone forgot to tell them that. The Academy's emergency alarms began wailing as we rushed to the command center. Admiral Thresh was already there, her crystalline form pulsing with agitation. It's worse than we thought, she said without preamble. This isn't just remnant forces. They've developed something new. Our scouts report they're calling it the Neuro-Leash Mark II. My blood ran cold. How is that possible? We destroyed their research. We destroyed what we knew about, Sylth said, entering the room with several of our top students. But the Syndicate always had contingency plans, hidden facilities, backup data stores, and this time they've adapted it to work on humans. Corinne's hand found my shoulder, squeezing gently. How many ships? 40, plus a command dreadnought we've never seen before. They're demanding complete surrender of the Academy, and specifically... Thresh paused, looking at me. They want Ethan Cole delivered to them alive. Me? Why me? You've become a symbol, Sylth explained, their scales shifting to a worried purple. The human who defeated them with chaos. They believe if they can break you, convert you, it will demoralize the entire resistance movement you've inspired. Plus, Corinne added grimly, they probably want to dissect your brain to understand how you resisted the first version. Comforting thought. Professor Malik entered, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. We're evacuating non-combatants, but we need time. The planetary defense grid can hold them for maybe 6 hours. Then we have 6 hours to come up with something impossibly stupid, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Against 40 ships and adapted technology specifically designed to counter human neural chaos. Vera asked skeptically, what could possibly work? I looked at my gripper, sitting innocuously on the command table where I'd set it down. An idea began forming, terrible and beautiful in its absolute insanity. We're going to let them win. Everyone stared at me like I'd lost my mind, which, to be fair, was a reasonable assumption. Explain, Corinne said, though I could see her already beginning to understand. They've adapted their technology to handle human chaos, right? They've studied our methods, prepared counters for everything we've taught. But what if we give them exactly what they expect: order, discipline, predictability, right up until we don't? Sylth's scales brightened with understanding. A reverse psychological operation, make them think their technology is working perfectly. While we prepare the most chaotic response in galactic history, I finished. But we'll need everyone, every student, every teacher, everyone who's ever held a gripper. That's over 3,000 beings, Admiral Thresh said. How do you coordinate chaos on that scale? You don't, Corinne said, grinning in that terrifying way that meant she was fully on board with whatever insanity I was planning. You create conditions for chaos to coordinate itself. We had 5 hours and 43 minutes when we started. The entire academy became a hive of bizarre activity. In the public areas, visible to any Vordock surveillance, students practiced perfect military drills, moving in synchronization that would make any traditional commander proud. But in hidden spaces, something else was happening. Boxer was teaching a group of engineers to build what he called aggressive architecture, structures that looked normal but could transform into abstract art installations at the press of a button. Cree was working with the telepathic students to create what he termed a psychic noise bomb, a coordinated mental scream of pure randomness. Vara had somehow convinced the Academy's kitchen staff to prepare 4,000 portions of the galaxy's spiciest food, though she wouldn't tell me why. "Trust me," she said, her expression worryingly similar to Corinne's battle grin. "You'll know when to use it." I found Sylph in the biolab, working on something that looked disturbingly like the neuro leash. "Before you ask," they said without looking up, "I'm not betraying anyone. I'm creating a reverse version. Instead of imposing order, it amplifies an individual's natural chaos." "Is that safe?" "Absolutely not, but neither is letting the Vordock win." 3 hours remaining. The Vordock fleet had positioned itself in a perfect assault formation. Their dreadnought, a massive black wedge of metal and malice, dominated the view screen. A transmission came through. The figure on the screen wore the distinctive armor of a Vordock admiral, but when they removed their helmet, I gasped. It was another Zalarian, scarred and modified with cybernetic enhancements. "I am Admiral Zeros," she announced, "former third blade of Thesix Prime, now enlightened by Vordock philosophy." Beside me, Corinne had gone completely still. "Zeros died in the massacre." "I was reborn," Zeros replied. Somehow hearing her, the Vordock showed me the truth. Order through control, peace through dominance. Your clan died because they were weak. Corinne, but you can still be saved. "Never." "Then you will watch your human pet become our newest recruit, Ethan Cole. You have 2 hours to surrender yourself, or we will take the Academy by force. Your chaos cannot save you. We have evolved beyond such primitive tactics." The transmission ended. Corinne punched the nearest wall hard enough to leave a dent. "She was my mentor," she said quietly, "the one who taught me to fight with honor, and they turned her into that." "We'll save her," I said, though I had no idea how. "No, she's gone. What's left is just an echo wearing her face." Corinne straightened, determination replacing grief. "But we'll make them pay for using her memory as a weapon." 1 hour remaining. Our public preparations showed the Academy ready to surrender. Students stood in neat rows, weapons laid down, heads bowed in apparent defeat. The Vordock would scan us, see exactly what they expected, broken spirits ready for conversion. Meanwhile, I stood in our old dorm room, looking at the spot where Corinne had first encountered my gripper. So much had changed since that day. "You're thinking too much," Corinne said from the doorway. "It's what I do. It's also your weakness. Sometimes you need to stop thinking and just act." She moved closer, taking my face in 2 of her hands. "Whatever happens next, I want you to know something. If this is a goodbye speech, it's not. It's a promise. When this is over, when we've sent these bastards running back to whatever hole they crawled from, I want to have a proper human wedding." I blinked. "What?" "I've been researching. White dress, flowers, something called a wedding cake that serves no tactical purpose. The whole ridiculous ceremony, because you've taught me that sometimes the ridiculous things are the most important." "Corinne, She kissed me, which was awkward given the height difference and the fact that Zalarians have slightly different mouth structures, but it was perfect anyway. Now, she said, pulling back, let's go be gloriously idiotic one more time. The Vordok ships descended with perfect precision, their troops deploying in textbook formation. They found the Academy's population assembled in the main plaza, quiet and orderly. Admiral Zeros herself led the ground forces, her modified form moving with mechanical precision. "Ethan Cole," she called out, "step forward." I did, making sure to move slowly, apparently defeated. The gripper was in my pocket, hidden but ready. "The great Chaos Champion," Zero sneered. "You will be the first to receive the new neuroleash. Your conversion will be broadcast across the galaxy." She produced the device, sleeker than the original, with additional components that hummed with ominous energy. As she approached, I could see Corinne in my peripheral vision, tense but playing her part as a defeated warrior. "Any last words?" Zeros asked. "Just one question," I said. "Do you know what makes humans truly dangerous? Your chaos is understood and countered. Not our chaos, our ability to cooperate." I smiled. Now, 3,000 beings acted simultaneously, but not in any coordinated way. That was the beauty of it. We'd given everyone a simple instruction: when you hear the signal, do whatever feels right. Kree's psychic noise bomb detonated first, a wave of pure mental static that made every telepath in the Vordok forces scream. Boxer's architectural surprises activated, buildings literally dancing and reshaping themselves into impossible forms. The kitchen staff launched their spice bombs, filling the air with capsaicin clouds that sent anyone with respiratory systems into coughing fits. But the real chaos came from the individual responses. A Felinian student started an impromptu opera. A group of engineers began aggressively juggling power tools. Someone had released several hundred holographic chickens that ran through the ranks, squawking random numbers. The new neuroleash in Zeros's hand began sparking. It had been designed to handle human chaos, but not 3,000 different types of chaos from dozens of species all at once. "Impossible," she snarled, trying to maintain control. "We adapted. We prepared." "You prepared for human chaos," I said, pulling out my gripper and beginning to squeeze it rhythmically. "But this isn't human chaos. This is universal chaos. Every species' unique brand of absurdity, all at once." Corinne moved then, not with her usual warrior's precision, but with something new, a fighting style that incorporated dance moves, random pauses, and at one point, aggressive complimenting. "Your cybernetics are very shiny," she shouted while disarming a Vordok soldier. "Did you polish them yourself? Such dedication." The psychological warfare was too much. Vordok soldiers, trained for any form of traditional combat, simply couldn't process opponents who fought while reciting poetry, performing card tricks, or in one memorable case, trying to teach them macrame. Sylph's reverse neuroleash devices activated among our forces, not controlling but amplifying each being's natural unpredictability. A usually reserved Altarian professor was now breakdancing while lecturing about quantum mechanics. It should have been chaos in our ranks too, but somehow it worked. Because chaos, when everyone's expecting it, becomes its own form of order. Admiral Zeros tried to retreat to her ship, but I intercepted her, not with violence, but with something worse, understanding. "I know you're still in there," I said, keeping my voice calm despite the absolute mayhem around us. "The real Zeros, the one who taught Corinne about honor. I am improved, evolved, free from weakness. You're enslaved, and deep down, you know it." I held out the gripper. "Corinne told me about you, how you used to train with simple tools, believing that mastery came from within, not from technology." Her cybernetic eye twitched. For a moment, I saw something flicker beneath the programming. "The swelling tool," she said quietly. "Corinne sent me a message about it, said it was the key to human strength. It's not, though, it's just exercise equipment. The strength comes from people choosing to believe it's more, just like real strength comes from choosing who you want to be, not being programmed. The battle raged around us, but in our small bubble something was happening. Zeros was fighting her programming, her organic eyes showing confusion, pain, and slowly, recognition. "Corinne," she whispered, "my student. I tried to kill my student." "But you didn't," Corinne said, appearing beside us, covered in what looked like glitter for some reason. "And you won't, because you're stronger than their technology." Zero screamed, not in anger, but in defiance, ripping the Vordock control module from her head. The feedback knocked her unconscious, but she was smiling. Across the plaza, the Vordock forces were in full retreat. Their perfect formation had dissolved into panicked individuals, fleeing from a mindling choir singing deliberately off-key, an engineer building impossible sculptures out of their equipment, and one very enthusiastic human teaching captured soldiers how to make balloon animals. But the dreadnought was still in orbit, and its weapons were charging. "They're going to bombard the planet," Admiral Thresh reported. "We have minutes." "Then we give them one last surprise," I said. "Everyone with a gripper, hold it up." 3,000 beings raised their spring-loaded exercise equipment to the sky. To the Vordock scanners, it must have looked like we were charging 3,000 unknown weapons. "Open a channel to their dreadnought," I ordered. The screen flickered to life, showing a Vordock commander who looked decidedly uncertain. "You see these devices?" I asked, squeezing my gripper so the spring was visible. 3,000 of them. "You know what one can do? Imagine 3,000. That's just exercise equipment," the commander sputtered. Are you willing to bet your dreadnought on that we defeated your ground forces with cooking spices and interpretive dance? Do you really want to find out what we can do with mysterious swelling tools?" The silence stretched for long moments. Then, without a word, the dreadnought turned and jumped to hyperspace. The remaining Vordock ships followed, leaving behind only confusion and a lot of glitter. The plaza erupted in celebration. Students hugged, laughed, and compared their various improvised chaos techniques. Someone had started a conga line that somehow included 2 captured Vordock soldiers who seemed very confused but oddly enthusiastic. I found Corinne tending to Zeros, who was slowly regaining consciousness. "Did we win?" Zeros asked weakly. "We did something better," Corinne said. "We stayed ourselves." The aftermath was galactic news. "Academy defeats Vordock with dance fighting and kitchen spices" became the most watched headline in history. The footage of 3,000 beings holding exercise equipment, while the galaxy's most feared military force fled, became a meme that transcended species. But more importantly, it changed everything. The Galactic Alliance officially recognized the Asymmetric Response Division as a new branch of defense. Not military, not police, but something unique. Protectors who fought with creativity instead of just force. Zyros, freed from Vordock control, became one of our most valuable instructors. Her experience with both traditional and controlled combat gave her unique insights. Plus, she and Corinne finally got to have the mentor-student relationship that had been stolen from them. "You really thought exercise equipment would scare them off?" she asked me one day during training. "No, I thought the idea of exercise equipment as a weapon would scare them. There's a difference. Human psychology is exhausting, but effective." She couldn't argue with that. The wedding happened 6 months later. Corinne had indeed researched human traditions, though her interpretation was unique. She wore white armor instead of a dress. The flowers were carnivorous plants from her homeworld. The cake was both decorative and somehow tactical, with hidden compartments for emergency weapons. "Do you, Ethan Cole, take this Zalarian warrior to be your battle-bonded partner, in chaos and in order, in victory and in strategic withdrawal until the heat death of the universe. I do, but we're calling defeats defeats, not strategic withdrawals. Do you, Corinne of Zelari, last daughter of Thesix Prime, take this gloriously idiotic human to be your partner in all things absurd and profound? I do, even though he can't open jars without help. Professor Malik, who was officiating, smiled. Then, by the power vested in me by the Academy, the Galactic Alliance, and apparently the Universal Church of Chaos that Boxer founded last week, I pronounce you married. You may kiss, high-five, or perform whatever culturally appropriate gesture of affection you prefer. We chose all three, which resulted in a tangle of limbs that had everyone laughing. At the reception, Admiral Thresh pulled me aside. Intelligence reports suggest the Vordok have completely abandoned this sector. Your reputation has spread. No one wants to face the man with the swelling tool. It's just a gripper, I protested for the 1,000th time. Not anymore. It's a symbol, one that says humans and their allies can't be predicted, controlled, or defeated through conventional means. So we won. For now, there will always be new threats, new challenges, but you've given the galaxy something powerful, the knowledge that strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the most powerful weapon is a complete refusal to fight the way your enemy expects. The party continued late into the night. At one point, I found myself standing with Corinne on a balcony, looking out at the stars. Any regrets? I asked. Just one. I never did figure out how your gripper actually works. I laughed, pulling it out and demonstrating the simple spring mechanism again. See, just resistance training. Nothing special. She took it from me, examining it with the same intensity she had that first day. Then she smiled, that fierce, beautiful expression that still made my heart race. No, you're wrong. It is special, not because of what it is, but because of what it represents. The power of perception, the strength of the unexpected, the victory of creativity over control. You're getting philosophical on me. You're rubbing off on me. Next, I'll be making puns. Now that would be true chaos. She squeezed the gripper once, watching the spring compress and release. You know what, I think I finally understand it. The gripper. No, humans, you're not chaos incarnate, you're possibility incarnate. You look at the universe and see not what is, but what could be. Even a simple exercise tool becomes a legend in your hands. Our hands, I corrected. None of this would have worked without you. True, your physical capabilities are still pathetic. Love you too. We stood there together, human and Zelarian, chaos and order, watching the stars and knowing that somewhere out there, new challenges waited, but we'd face them the same way we always had. Together, with creativity, humor, and yes, a simple spring-loaded gripper that had somehow become the most feared weapon in the galaxy. The Academy had returned to its normal, abnormal state. Students from 100 worlds learning not just to fight, but to think, to laugh, to find strength in their differences. The Asymmetric Response Division had graduated its 5th class, each group more creatively chaotic than the last. In my office, which I shared with Corinne, the original gripper sat in a place of honor on the shelf. Visitors often asked to see it, to hold the legendary swelling tool that had changed the course of galactic history. It's just exercise equipment, I'd tell them. But they'd always smile knowingly, convinced I was keeping some secret about its true power. And maybe I was. Because its true power was that it had no power. It was just a thing that became more through belief, through story, through the beautiful absurdity of beings choosing to see magic in the mundane. A knock at the door interrupted my reflection. Vera entered, looking excited. Professors, we've received a transmission from beyond the outer rim. Corinne and I exchanged glances. The outer rim was unexplored territory, beyond the reach of the Alliance. What kind of transmission? Corinne asked. It's strange. They claim to be refugees from something they call the Harmony Collective. They say they've heard of the Academy's methods and want to learn, but here's the weird part. They specifically asked if the wielder of the swelling tool would teach them. I groaned. It's spread beyond our galaxy. Apparently, your reputation transcends spatial boundaries, Corinne said with amusement. So, do we respond? Vara asked. I looked at Karin, who nodded. We respond, we teach, we spread the chaos. And the cycle continues, I muttered. Did you expect it to end? Corinne asked. You started something that can't be stopped, Ethan. The idea that the weak can be strong, that the silly can be serious, that a piece of gym equipment can change the universe. When you put it like that, it sounds almost profound. It is profound, profoundly idiotic, the best kind. As we prepared to meet these new refugees, to teach them our unconventional methods, I reflected on the journey, from a terrified human student afraid of his warrior roommate to a professor of chaos married to that same warrior, from a misunderstanding about exercise equipment to a galactic revolution in thinking. The gripper had started it all, but it wasn't about the gripper. It never had been. It was about the moment Corinne had screamed and run into a wall, and instead of correcting the misunderstanding, we'd run with it. We'd taken something mundane and made it legendary through nothing more than commitment to the bit. That was humanity's real gift to the galaxy, not our chaos or our adaptability, but our ability to believe our own bullshit so completely that we made it real. And as long as there were beings willing to learn, to laugh, to look at the impossible and say yes, and we'd keep teaching. Keep spreading the beautiful absurdity that had saved us all. The swelling tool sat on its shelf, spring-loaded and ready, a monument to the power of perception and the victory of creativity over control. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon really is the friends you make along the way. And a piece of exercise equipment that everyone thinks is something more